Most people think destiny arrives with sirens. Mine arrived with a whisper. That car has a problem. I wasn't supposed to notice anything that morning. I was just the maid who cleaned marble floors that reflected chandeliers worth more than everything I owned. My name is Emily Carter, 29 years old, single mom, 2 jobs, one 6-year-old daughter waiting for me to pick her up after school. Every dollar I earned already had somewhere to go before it ever reached my hands. Rent, groceries, Lily's asthma medication, the old Honda that begged for mercy every time I turned the key. I had learned a long time ago that invisible people survived by keeping their heads down. So that Tuesday should have been ordinary. I finished polishing the last window of the Ashcroft estate just after 9. The spring air carried the scent of freshly cut grass, and the morning sun bounced off a line of luxury cars parked near the entrance. Men in tailored black suits spoke quietly into earpieces while landscapers pretended not to notice them. Wealth had its own rhythm. Calm, controlled, untouchable. I adjusted the sleeves of my faded housekeeping uniform and hurried toward the employee gate. Every minute mattered because Lily hated waiting outside her elementary school. Halfway across the circular driveway, something caught my eye. One of the black SUVs sat with its front wheel turned slightly toward the curb. A thin metallic piece peeked out beneath the frame where nothing should have been. I slowed without meaning to. Maybe it was because my late husband had spent years repairing cars before cancer stole him from us. Maybe it was because I'd watched him crawl under enough vehicles to recognize when something looked wrong. I took 2 cautious steps closer. The metal piece wasn't part of the suspension. It looked freshly attached. Too clean. Too deliberate. Before I could think twice, the mansion doors opened. Every conversation stopped. A tall man walked outside surrounded by security. Adrian Moretti. Even if you had never heard his name, you would have felt people making room for him before he reached them. He wore a charcoal suit beneath a tailored overcoat, and confidence followed him as naturally as his shadow. His expression never changed, but everyone else's did. They stood straighter, spoke softer, moved faster. I lowered my eyes and started walking away. Invisible people didn't interrupt powerful men. Then Adrian reached for the SUV's door handle. My heart stumbled. I looked back at that strange piece beneath the vehicle. Every instinct screamed to leave. I had Lily waiting. I had bills waiting. I had absolutely no reason to involve myself in a stranger's life. But another thought pushed through all the fear. What if I'm right? Before courage could disappear, I turned around and hurried across the driveway. One guard stepped directly into my path. Employees aren't allowed over here. I swallowed hard. I know. My voice barely came out. Adrian glanced toward us with calm, unreadable eyes. The guard waited for him to dismiss me. Instead, Adrian simply watched. My pulse pounded in my ears. "Sir," I said, forcing the words out before fear could steal them. "That car has a problem." For 3 endless seconds, no one moved. Then Adrian looked from my face to the SUV. Without asking me another question, he lifted one finger toward his security chief. "Check it." The security chief gave a short nod, and within seconds 2 technicians in dark uniforms knelt beside the SUV. Nobody spoke. Even the birds in the towering oak trees seemed to disappear into the strange silence that settled across the driveway. I stood frozen beside the stone fountain, suddenly wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Maybe I had embarrassed myself over a loose bracket or a harmless piece of road debris. Maybe everyone would laugh the moment they realized the poor maid had imagined a problem that did not exist. One of the technicians slid beneath the vehicle with a flashlight, while another carefully examined the front wheel assembly. Adrian Moretti never looked away from me. His expression stayed perfectly calm, but there was something unsettling about the way he observed people. It was not judgment. It was precision, as though every heartbeat and every blink revealed something worth remembering. My palms grew damp inside. My worn housekeeping gloves. I thought about Lily waiting for me after school. I thought about the overdue electric bill sitting on my kitchen counter. I wished I had simply walked away. Then the technician rolled back out from beneath the SUV much faster than he had gone in. He whispered something into the security chief's ear. I could not hear the words, but I watched the man's face lose every trace of confidence. He immediately motioned everyone to step away from the vehicle. The entire driveway shifted into quiet motion. No shouting, no panic, just calm professionals following silent instructions with remarkable discipline. Adrian finally turned toward his security chief. How long? He asked. We do not know yet, sir. But she was right. Those 5 words changed the air around me. Every pair of eyes landed on me at once. I suddenly felt far too small for the enormous driveway. The security chief walked toward me with measured steps. His serious expression made my stomach tighten. Miss Carter, he said after reading my employee badge, where did you learn to recognize something like that? I shook my head. My husband repaired cars. He always told me that if something looks out of place underneath a vehicle, it usually is. Saying the word husband still hurt, even after 3 years. The security chief studied me for another moment before nodding slowly. Adrian stepped closer, stopping several feet away. Up close, he looked younger than I expected, perhaps 34, with tired eyes that suggested sleep rarely found him. The tattoos extending above his shirt collar disappeared beneath perfectly tailored fabric, revealing only enough ink to hint at stories he never intended to explain. You could have kept walking, he said quietly. I shrugged because I did not know what else to do. I almost did. Why did you come back? I looked down at my shoes before answering. Because if I was wrong, I would only waste a minute of your morning. If I was right, my voice faded. Someone taught you to pay attention, he finished for me. I nodded once. My husband did. Adrian remained silent for several seconds before reaching into his coat pocket. One of his assistants immediately stepped forward carrying an envelope. Adrian accepted it without looking. Take this. I glanced inside and instantly closed it again. There was more money than I had probably earned in months. My heartbeat quickened. I carefully held the envelope back toward him. I cannot accept this. Several guards exchanged confused looks. Adrian raised one eyebrow. Most people would. Maybe, I answered softly. But my daughter is waiting for me, and the only thing I wanted was to make sure you did not get into that car. For the first time since we met, something almost invisible crossed his face. It was not a smile. It was something rarer. Respect. I picked Lily up exactly 5 minutes before the final school bell echoed across the playground, because I had promised myself she would never wonder whether someone was coming for her. She spotted my old Honda from the sidewalk and ran toward me with the bright smile that somehow made every exhausting day feel survivable. Her blonde ponytail bounced behind her as she climbed into the passenger seat carrying a paper bag decorated with uneven hearts and blue crayons. I made this for you, she said proudly. Inside was a drawing of the two of us standing beneath a giant yellow sun beside a tiny house with flowers in every window. There was no mansion, no luxury cars, no expensive suits, just home. That evening, after macaroni and cheese and 20 minutes of helping Lily practice reading, I tucked her into bed and kissed her forehead before quietly closing her bedroom door. The apartment felt unusually peaceful. I did not know that several miles away another conversation had just begun because of me. Adrian stood inside a private office overlooking the city skyline. The floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the lights of Manhattan, while the room remained almost silent except for the ticking of an antique clock. His security chief placed a thin folder on the desk. Emily Carter, he said. Adrian rested one hand on the leather chair without opening the file. Tell me something I cannot guess. 29 years old. Widow. 1 daughter. Lives in Queens. Works as a maid at Ashcroft Estate during the mornings. Cleans offices 3 evenings each week and works weekend shifts at a neighborhood bakery. Adrian slowly opened the folder. Inside were ordinary photographs. Emily carrying groceries. Emily helping an elderly neighbor with heavy bags. Emily waiting outside an elementary school, holding a pink backpack. Nothing about the pictures suggested someone chasing money or influence. Any criminal history? Adrian asked. None. Outstanding debts. Only medical bills left from her husband's illness. She has never missed a payment. Adrian continued turning pages. There were copies of employment records, volunteer activities at Lily's school, and handwritten recommendations from former clients describing Emily with the same words again and again. Honest. Reliable. Kind. The security chief folded his hands behind his back. She refused the reward because she truly expected nothing in return. Adrian looked toward the city lights without speaking. In his world, favors always carried hidden prices. Every handshake created an obligation. Every compliment concealed an agenda. Yet somehow a woman who struggled to pay rent had walked away from more money than most families earned in months simply because she believed helping another person was the right thing to do. That idea stayed with him longer than he cared to admit. Meanwhile, I sat at my tiny kitchen table balancing receipts beneath the warm glow of a single lamp. My calculator displayed numbers that refused to cooperate. The rent was due in 8 days. Lily needed new shoes before summer. My refrigerator hummed louder than usual, reminding me it would probably need repairs soon. I smiled anyway because Lily was asleep in the next room, safe and dreaming. Sometimes that felt like enough. Just before midnight, my phone vibrated on the table. There was no caller identification. I hesitated before answering. A calm male voice spoke only one sentence. "Miss Carter, Mr. Moretti asked us to remind you that good people should never regret doing the right thing." Before I could respond, the line quietly disconnected, leaving me staring at the silent phone and wondering why the most powerful man I had ever met was still thinking about a maid who believed she had already returned to an ordinary life. The next morning felt almost ordinary, and that was what unsettled me the most. I drove Lily to school with the windows rolled halfway down because she loved feeling the spring breeze in her hair. She spent the entire ride telling me about a science project involving butterflies, carefully explaining why caterpillars had to struggle before they could fly. I smiled at the innocence in her voice and wondered if adults ever truly stopped struggling or if we simply became better at hiding it. After dropping her off, I headed toward the Ashcroft estate for another shift. Everything looked exactly as it had the day before. The fountain sparkled beneath the morning sun. Gardeners trimmed the hedges with perfect precision. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway like polished sculptures. Yet something had changed. Every security guard I passed greeted me politely. Before, I had barely existed. Now they nodded as though they had memorized my face. I tried not to think about it and focused on my work. Dusting bookshelves, polishing mirrors, folding fresh towels. Simple tasks. Predictable tasks. The kind that kept my thoughts quiet. Around lunchtime, I stepped outside through the service entrance to eat the sandwich I had packed from home. I sat beneath a maple tree near the employee parking lot, enjoying 10-piece F. For the next several days, I convinced myself that life had returned to normal, but normal has a strange way of changing without asking permission. Every morning, I drove Lily to school. Every afternoon, I cleaned houses that could have fit my entire apartment inside one guest bedroom. And every evening, I counted every dollar before paying another bill. Yet little things began happening that made no sense. The landlord, who had spent months reminding me about rising maintenance costs, knocked on my apartment door one Thursday evening with an awkward smile. "Miss Carter, I wanted to let you know we found an accounting error. Your rent will stay the same for another year." I blinked in surprise. "Are you sure?" He nodded quickly. "Already taken care of." Before I could ask another question, he wished Lily a good evening and hurried down the hallway. I stood there holding the new lease agreement, wondering how accounting mistakes always seem to cost tenants more money instead of saving them. 2 days later, my aging Honda began making the same rattling noise that always appeared before an expensive repair. I stopped by the small neighborhood garage where my late husband used to work. The owner, Frank, walked around the car twice before lifting the hood. 20 minutes later, he wiped his hands on a clean towel and smiled. "You are good to go." I reached for my purse. "How much do I owe you?" Frank looked genuinely confused. "Nothing. That cannot be right." He shook his head. "Someone already covered everything." My stomach tightened. "Who?" Frank only shrugged. "Nice fellow in a charcoal suit. Did not leave a name." I drove home more unsettled than relieved. That evening, Lily ran into the apartment waving another envelope from school. "Mommy, look." Inside was a letter announcing that she had received a full scholarship for the district's summer science camp. My eyes stopped on one sentence. Anonymous community sponsor. Lily jumped up and down with excitement. Now I get to study butterflies all summer. I hugged her tightly and smiled because she deserved every opportunity the world could offer. Still, the timing felt impossible. After Lily fell asleep, I spread every recent letter across my kitchen table. The rent, the repaired car, the scholarship. 3 impossible blessings arriving within the same week. I wanted to believe the universe had finally decided to be kind, but life had taught me that coincidences rarely arrived in groups. Across Manhattan, Adrian listened quietly as his security chief reviewed the latest report. Her car is safe. The apartment building has been checked. Lily's school has additional security during dismissal. Adrian nodded once. Has she noticed? Only enough to ask questions. Adrian walked toward the window overlooking the river. The city lights reflected against the glass, hiding his expression. Good. It stays that way. The security chief hesitated. Sir, she may eventually discover who arranged these things. Adrian answered without turning around. Perhaps. But kindness that expects recognition is only another transaction. The following Monday, I finished cleaning the library at Ashcroft Estate and headed toward the employee parking lot carrying my lunch bag and sweater. As I reached my Honda, I noticed a small white envelope tucked beneath the windshield wiper. There was no name, no return address, just a single handwritten sentence inside. Good people should never have to stand alone. I read the words twice before looking around the nearly empty parking lot. Whoever had left the note was already gone, but for the first time since that morning in the driveway, I no longer believed our paths had crossed by accident. The first sign that something was wrong arrived on a warm Friday afternoon wrapped in complete silence. I parked across the street from Lily's elementary school 10 minutes earlier than usual because her class was presenting their butterfly projects, and she had begged me not to be late. Children laughed on the playground while parents gathered along the sidewalk holding coffee cups and folding chairs. It looked like every ordinary school afternoon in America, and perhaps that was why the uneasy feeling in my chest refused to leave. I looked around without knowing exactly what I was searching for until I noticed the same dark sedan parked half a block away. Its windows reflected the afternoon sun, hiding whoever sat inside. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Maybe it was another parent. Maybe it was nothing. I stepped out of my Honda and forced myself to smile as the school doors opened. Lily spotted me immediately and came running with a cardboard butterfly painted bright blue and purple. She threw her arms around my waist. Mommy, I got first place. I laughed and kissed the top of her head. I knew you would. We had barely taken a few steps toward the parking lot when a silver sport utility vehicle rolled slowly along the curb before stopping farther ahead. Two men stepped out wearing ordinary jackets and baseball caps. There was nothing threatening about them, yet something felt strangely rehearsed. One of them glanced toward Lily for only a second before speaking quietly into a phone. A chill moved through me. Instinct whispered before logic could answer. I turned back toward the school entrance. Lily, stay close to me. She looked up with confused green eyes, but slipped her small hand into mine without asking questions. Before we reached the front doors again, another familiar vehicle pulled smoothly to the curb. It was one of the black sport utility vehicles I had seen outside Ashcroft Estate. Two well-dressed men stepped out with calm expressions. They did not run. They did not shout. One simply walked toward us and spoke in a respectful voice. Miss Carter, please remain inside the school for a few minutes. My heart skipped. Who are you? He offered a polite nod. Friends. I almost laughed at the impossible answer until I saw the silver sport utility vehicle quietly pull away from the curb and disappear around the corner without anyone following us. Everything happened so naturally that most parents never even noticed. The man beside me touched an earpiece for a brief moment before relaxing his shoulders. You and your daughter are safe. Safe. The word echoed inside my mind. Did Adrian Moretti send you? I asked before I could stop myself. The man hesitated for only a heartbeat. Mr. Moretti believes good people deserve to arrive home. He opened my car door, waited until Lily climbed inside, then stepped back with quiet professionalism. I drove away with more questions than answers. Across the city, Adrian listened as his security chief finished the report. They left the moment our team became visible. No contact was made. Adrian stared at the skyline beyond his office window. His jaw tightened ever so slightly. They were testing the distance between her and me. Do you want us to increase protection? Adrian answered without taking his eyes off the horizon. She saved my life because she believed every life mattered. Until I know this is over, her family becomes my responsibility. That night, after I tucked Lily into bed, she wrapped her small arms around my neck and whispered, Mommy, I think somebody is watching over us. I held her a little tighter and smiled through the uncertainty. Deep inside, I was beginning to believe she was right. The following Monday, I could no longer pretend that Adrian Moretti was simply a wealthy man who had briefly crossed my path. Every unexplained kindness, every quiet intervention, every impossible coincidence pointed back to him. Even so, I refused to believe that anyone should solve my problems simply because I had tried to do the right thing. That afternoon, I finished my shift at Ashcroft Estate and asked one of the house managers if Mr. Moretti was available for a moment. She looked surprised, but nodded politely before disappearing through a pair of carved wooden doors. A few minutes later, she returned. "He will see you now." I followed her through a hallway lined with paintings older than the country itself until we reached a sunlit library overlooking the gardens. Adrian stood beside a large window with a cup of black coffee in one hand. Without his suit jacket, the sleeves of his white shirt were rolled to his forearms, revealing intricate tattoos that disappeared beneath the fabric. He turned as I entered, his expression as composed as ever. "Miss Carter." I folded my hands together to stop myself from fidgeting. "I came to say thank you." One corner of his mouth almost lifted. "For what exactly?" "The rent. My car. Lily's scholarship. The people outside her school." He remained silent for several seconds before setting his coffee on a nearby table. "You assume I arranged those things. Did you?" His eyes met mine without hesitation. "Yes." The honesty caught me completely off guard. I had expected denial, excuses, or careful explanations. Instead, he answered with one simple word. I let out a slow breath. "You did not have to." "I know." "Then why?" Adrian walked toward the bookshelf, lightly running his fingers across the worn leather spines before answering. "Because you reminded me that goodness still exists without conditions." I frowned. "I am just a maid trying to raise my daughter." "Exactly." His voice remained calm. "You expected nothing. You asked for nothing. You saved someone you believed was a stranger." I lowered my eyes, unsure how to respond. Most people would have walked away. I smiled faintly. Maybe. But then I would have spent the rest of my life wondering what might have happened. Adrian nodded slowly as though that answer confirmed something he had already suspected. "Do you know what people usually want from me?" I shook my head. "Money. Influence. Protection. Access. Sometimes revenge." He looked out toward the gardens where the afternoon sunlight danced across the fountain. "You are the first person in many years who wanted absolutely nothing." His words carried no pride, only quiet exhaustion. For the first time, I stopped seeing the powerful businessman everyone feared and saw a man who rarely knew whether anyone around him was telling the truth. The silence between us no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt honest. "Mr. Moretti," I said softly, "I appreciate everything you have done, but Lily and I cannot build our lives depending on favors." He turned back toward me with the same steady gaze that had unsettled me from the beginning. "Then do not think of them as favors." "What should I call them?" His answer came so quietly I almost missed it. "A promise." Before I could ask what he meant, his security chief entered the library carrying a folder. He stopped after noticing me, but Adrian simply extended his hand. The folder was passed to him without a word. Adrian opened it, scanned the first page, and for the first time since I had met him, the calm confidence in his eyes hardened into careful concern. He closed the folder gently and looked directly at me. "Emily," he said, his voice lower than before, "I need to ask you one very important question. Has anyone new tried to become your friend this week?" My mind raced through every conversation I had during the past week. I thought about my neighbors, the parents outside Lily's school, the cashier at the grocery store, even the elderly woman who always smiled at the bus stop. Nothing felt unusual until one memory quietly surfaced. There was someone, I admitted. Adrian did not interrupt. A woman introduced herself outside Lily's school 2 days ago. She said she had just moved into the neighborhood and asked which apartments had the best landlords. We talked for maybe 2 minutes. Adrian's expression remained perfectly still. "Did she ask about your work?" I nodded slowly. "She asked where I spent my mornings because she was looking for housekeeping recommendations." The room fell silent. Adrian handed the folder back to his security chief before looking at me again. "Emily, I need you to understand something. None of this is your fault." I frowned. "You keep saying that, but everyone around me suddenly acts as though I am standing in the middle of something dangerous." Adrian folded his hands in front of him. "Because you unknowingly stepped into a situation that was never yours to carry." He walked toward the window overlooking the gardens where gardeners continued trimming roses as though the world beyond the gates had never changed. "The people responsible for placing that device beneath my vehicle failed. People who fail rarely accept failure quietly. They begin asking questions. They look for details that might explain what happened." I felt my stomach tighten. "Including me." Adrian nodded once. "Including you." I wrapped my arms around myself. suddenly feeling much smaller inside the enormous library. I never wanted any of this. I was only trying to help. I know. His answer came immediately. That is exactly why I refuse to let your kindness become your burden. Those words settled somewhere deep inside me. For the first time since all of this began, I realized Adrian never spoke about protecting himself. Every decision he described centered on Lily and me. The powerful man standing before me was not asking for loyalty. He was honoring a debt no one had demanded he repay. My eyes drifted toward the family photograph sitting on a nearby shelf. It showed Adrian several years younger beside an elderly couple whose smiles carried warmth that his own face rarely revealed. "Your parents?" I asked softly. He glanced at the picture and nodded. "My mother believed that character is measured by how you protect people who cannot repay you." He looked back at me. "She would have liked you." I felt unexpectedly emotional. I wish I could have met her. A quiet smile finally appeared, gentle, enough that it transformed his entire face. "She would have insisted on feeding you before allowing you to leave." I laughed for the first time in days, and somehow the heavy atmosphere inside the room became lighter. At that exact moment, a cheerful voice echoed from the open doorway. "Mommy." Lily stood there holding the hand of one of Adrian's assistants, her butterfly project tucked safely beneath her arm. She looked from me to Adrian with wide, curious eyes before walking straight toward him without a trace of fear. "Are you Mr. Moretti?" she asked. Adrian lowered himself to one knee so they were at eye level. "I am." Lily smiled and carefully handed him the paper butterfly she had won at school. "Mommy says thank you matters more when you can see the person's face." Adrian accepted the handmade butterfly with extraordinary care, as though it were something priceless instead of folded construction paper. For several quiet seconds, he simply looked at it before meeting Lily's eyes again. "This may be the most valuable gift I have ever received." As I watched my daughter hug the man the entire city seemed to fear, I realized something remarkable. Lily did not see power. She did not see wealth. She saw kindness being returned, and somehow that simple truth reminded both of us what courage had started in the first place. 1 year later, I sometimes parked in the same spot outside Lily's school, just to remind myself how quickly an ordinary afternoon could change an ordinary life. The butterflies she had once studied now filled the small community garden behind her elementary school, a project funded by donations that arrived without headlines or speeches. Children laughed between colorful flowers while parents gathered on wooden benches, and for the first time in many years, I found myself believing that peace was something a person could build one quiet day at a time. Life looked different now, although not in the way people might imagine. I still worked because honest work reminded me who I had always been. Instead of cleaning 3 different houses every week, I managed a charitable foundation that helped single parents find housing, childcare, and reliable jobs. Adrian insisted the foundation carry my late husband's name rather than his own. "People need hope, not another reminder of me," he had said when the paperwork was signed. That sentence told me more about the man he had become than any newspaper ever could. Adrian had changed as well. The sharp walls he once built around himself slowly disappeared, replaced by quiet mornings drinking coffee on my porch and evenings helping Lily with homework she always pretended was much harder than it really was. He never tried to replace her father. He simply showed up every single day until trust became stronger than fear. Lily adored him for reasons no one needed to explain. She loved that he never missed a school concert, that he remembered every science project, and that he listened as though every story she told was the most important conversation in the world. One Saturday afternoon, we returned to Ashcroft Estate for a charity event supporting working families. The grand driveway looked exactly as it had the morning we first met. The fountain shimmered beneath the sunlight. Luxury vehicles lined the entrance. Employees hurried through polished halls. Yet everything felt different because I no longer walked with my eyes fixed on the ground. Adrian stopped beside the same place where his vehicle had once been parked and looked at me with a thoughtful smile. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had kept walking?" I looked toward the driveway before answering. "Sometimes." And I reached for his hand. "I think 2 people would have remained strangers." He smiled quietly. "I think one man would have forgotten there were still people brave enough to care about someone they did not know." The music from the charity reception drifted through the open doors while a warm breeze carried the scent of fresh roses across the gardens. Lily came running toward us wearing a bright yellow dress, her butterfly necklace bouncing against her shoulders. Family picture, she announced proudly, holding up a small instant camera. We laughed as she hurried us together beneath the old maple tree. She counted to 3 before pressing the button. The photograph slowly appeared between her fingers. Adrian wrapped one arm around my shoulders while Lily stood between us grinning from ear to ear. She studied the picture for several seconds before handing it to me. "This is my favorite one," she whispered. I looked at the smiling faces captured on the small square of paper and realized she was right. Not because the picture was perfect, but because it was honest. Adrian gently brushed a loose strand of hair away from my face. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" I asked. His eyes never left mine. "For reminding me that the strongest people are not always the loudest or the richest. Sometimes they are simply the ones who choose kindness when nobody is watching." Tears warmed my eyes as I leaned forward and kissed him gently. It was not a dramatic moment. There were no cameras, no applause, no grand declarations. Just gratitude, hope, and 2 hearts that had found each other because one frightened single mother refused to ignore something that did not look right. If I learned anything from that extraordinary year, it was this. A single act of kindness may save a life for a moment, but when it is answered with integrity, it can change the future of an entire family forever.